Welcome, and thank you for joining us at our Going, Living, and Studying Abroad with an Accommodation or Disability webinar. And this is part of the Exploring Your Identity Abroad series that's been part of the UC collaboration. Today, we're going to have 4 panelists, including myself, and we're going to go over a bunch of topics related to studying abroad with an accommodation or disability. First, I do want to acknowledge the collaboration that this allows us to do this webinar. It's a collaboration between the UC campuses, and we have a whole series of other webinars addressing topics about identity and belonging in study abroad programs. And we encourage you to look at those as well. They're recorded on our website and available on YouTube and on many of the campuses' websites as well. And today, just to introduce who we are, the presenters, we're a collaboration of 3 entities, the University of California Education Abroad Program, UCEAP, and UC Berkeley, and the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange, which is part of Mobility International at USA. My name is Noah Cutchins. I'm an Associate Program Director at UCEAP, and I'll ask my co-presenters to introduce themselves as well, starting with Justin.
Hello, this is Justin Harvard. I'm a program specialist with MyUSA, working on our NCDE, our Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange, and also studied abroad a couple times as a blind student 15 years ago in Mexico and Chile, where I spent more than a year. So moving on to the next person.
Hi, my name is Samantha Jewell. I'm a study abroad advisor with UCEAP. I studied abroad in Greece and did a couple of small programs in Portugal. And I'm really happy to be here to help present all this information for you guys.
Hi, my name is Erin, and I work at UC Berkeley as an intake advisor in our study abroad office. I studied abroad with the UCEAP at the University of Ghana as a GSP student, and I'm really excited to be here.
And today we have some goals that we want to accomplish, and just want to start with those. And what we're hoping to have by the end of this workshop is an idea of preparation and planning, how to identify reasonable accommodations, legal issues, and how accommodations are defined differently around the world. We want to identify practical challenges and barriers, emotional and psychological, pedagogic, financial, and we want to cover the topic of advocacy for oneself and using a variety of resources, leveraging those resources, adapting different cultures, and increasing learning access that has a benefit for everyone. I do want to start with some data that we have for students with disabilities abroad nationally. And we have 2 images here that we're looking at. And this is data from the Institute of International Education that collects data from all of the universities in the US that send students abroad and contribute to this Open Doors report. And you can see that in 2017, 2018, as a nation, we were sending 9.2% of our students abroad who had a disability. And that number has fluctuated in this top row. You can see in 2018, it was 10.5, 2019 increased to 12.4, and 11.2 for 2020, 10.5, and 10.8. So that number has been relatively stable, a little bit of backslide since before the pandemic. But I think it's important to look at these other numbers that are below it that identify the type of disability. And the first thing I would notice is that the increase or the decrease in the category of learning disability you'll see went from 35.2 in 2021-22 down to 10.1. But obviously you can see in 2021, a new category for ADHD was added for 23.5. So that would answer that question of why that would be going lower. But some of the other categories, tell another story. So if we're looking at, for example, mobility and physical disability, you can see that we were sending 4.1% in 2017-18, and haven't got above 2.5% since the pandemic. So that's a significant percentage when we're not sending that many. So that's a trend. And when we look for trends, we look for reasons why, and we look for how to correct them. So this is where we are as a country. In the UC, we collected data about students with disabilities and accommodations to a certain extent. The number that we have most recently is about 9%. It's been going up, and that's because I think we are having more students who enroll with a disability and receive accommodations, but also more students are feeling comfortable to disclose their accommodations and disabilities. So with this data, we're gonna watch a quick video, and this is a video about getting around, and from the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange.
I found that I was lost quite a lot especially when I was backpacking. Being in a foreign country where you've never been before, you tend to get lost.
The National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange presents Getting Around in a Foreign Country. Cerise Roth-Finson works for Mobility International USA.
I think going abroad requires a certain sense of adventure. If you're going abroad and thinking it's going to be perfect, it's not.
When I arrive in a less developed city, transportation is obviously an issue, and how I'm going to get from A to B.
Shen Hayward is a wheelchair user.
Normally I just use taxis.
My biggest challenge was just getting around because I cannot read street signs and billboards and things like that.
Leila Farouk is a Fulbright student with albinism.
I had support from technology, but I also realized that I could just ask people, and generally people are really nice and they let you know which street you're on.
Being able to communicate the need assertively for access in a different language, I learned how to act out help, and like the 2 words I could say were ayúdame, por favor, help me please, and then show them where to put their hands on my chair. And that turned out to be an important technique.
Yeah, I thought traveling was a lot easier in Chile.
Justin Harford is a blind study abroad participant.
I think a lot of other people will find this really shocking, but for me as somebody whose main priority was public transportation, it was much easier to travel in Chile.
It wasn't until I just dove in and started traveling again that I figured out that it was actually really easy.
Get your passport to possibilities. Contact us at www.miusa.org/NCDE.
I think you saw that we featured Justin there.
So on the next slide, I'm just going to talk about what exactly it is that the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange does. And so that was back before I worked for it and when I had a little bit more hair. So our mission is to increase the participation of people with disabilities in education abroad between the United States and other countries. And for us, education abroad is broadly defined. It could be a study program. It could also be a professional exchange. It could be scholarly research abroad. It could be teaching or working abroad. But really any kind of travel that is purposeful as opposed to tourists. So the way we do this is through our education abroad consulting services, workshops, articles, which you can find at www.miusa.org, professional stories and tip sheets and best practices. We also have programming such as our Access to Exchange externship for education abroad alumni. So educate yourself about how to study abroad in our new series of learning pathways. We call it the U.S. Individuals with Disabilities Education Abroad Pathway. You can access it at our website right now. And it is a series of articles that have been strung together, mixed up with quizzes and personal reflections. You'll go through and learn all about what the field is and all the technicals of how to study abroad with a disability. And you'll also put together your own education abroad plan. So back to you. Oh, and I guess I'm on the next slide too. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. So this next slide just basically overviews the resources that I mentioned. And going on to the next slide. So often people ask us, where can I study abroad, right? And this is one of the things we'll take up in the pathway. But generally speaking, it really should be centered around what your goals are around a program. And then once you've kind of figured that out, you can work out what kinds of disability accommodations, how you're going to make your accommodations work. So really, it's kind of like you're writing a story, and it's all about the who, what, where, when, and why. And so on the slide, we've got what kind of a program do you want to do? Where do you want to do it? Who do you want to do it with? Because it's not just US students. There could be international students from other countries. There could be students from the host country. When do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? So, and all these I think are relatively self-explanatory, but they are definitely questions that I think if you answer those for yourself and you plan your program around that first, then you're going to end up with a more fulfilling experience. So passing it on to you, Erin.
Thank you. For our next slide, where can I study abroad? This is a great question, and a lot of students will have DSP accommodations. This is the first question they have in mind, depending on what their accommodation is. Well, the first question you might want to ask yourself are, what kind of accommodations do you have that make your academic and personal life successful? That might be step one. And which of these will be available to you in the program that you choose, so that you are comfortable where you are. And if you can't have that reasonable accommodation available to you in the program that you choose, how will this affect you? Is it going to be a positive impact, a negative impact? And that can help you choose your program as well. And is there an alternative, a reasonable accommodation? That definitely depends on what type of accommodation you have. Is it extra time, single room, a specialized doctor? This all depends on program. It's program specific. I know this sounds really broad, but I highly encourage you to talk to your study abroad advisor and try to see what accommodations are available in locations that you're interested in.
And I believe I got the next slide, revisiting what disability is like in other countries. So when I grew up, I would always hear that in Mexico, blind people were thought of as the pobrecitos. You know, there's a lot of negativity, I think. When I would talk to other people about, especially people from developing countries, they'd talk about their home country, their parents' home country, and it was a pretty negative perception overall. But how can we really boil this down? Well, so on this slide, we just have a few of our thoughts on disability in other countries. So to start with, the Americans with Disabilities Act doesn't apply in other countries, but most countries have ratified and signed the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and many of them have passed disability-related legislation that is based around the CRPD. So to some extent, even if you don't have US-style accessibility and rights in another country, it's likely that you will have a certain level of rights within the legal framework of your host country. Countries that are more kind of well off, like the United States or the United Kingdom, may have more formal accommodation procedures, while countries that are middle and low income, such as Mexico, for example, maybe you'll be more likely to have kind of more ad hoc or improvised or informal types of accommodations. You'll go up to your professor and informally ask for something like extra time on tests or to have exam materials emailed to you as opposed to going through a formal office. In the slide, we mentioned RA, so that's just an acronym, reasonable accommodation. So going back to, the EAP does have a formal reasonable accommodation or RA procedure, and I'm going to pass it on to Samantha to detail that.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, we do have a formal procedure. And like Justin mentioned, a lot of accommodations vary by country, but disclosing all your information about your disability early on in the process is so crucial. Communication is key about this. So when I'm talking about the accommodation process and how to request accommodations for your study abroad program, know that right now I'm talking about the UCEAP process. So if you go through a faculty-led program or a non-UCEAP program, possibly, the process might look a little different, but it's probably around the same thing. One, like I mentioned, communication is key. It really, really helps when we know about your disability accommodation early on, so we can plan with our partner and we can get you in contact with the right people abroad in your host country so that they can start planning and preparing and talking through about what kind of accommodations you need. And so doing all this disclosing early is good. So you can do it pretty much whenever. As soon as you submit an application, you can email someone and say, hey, I have a disability, what do I do? Or when you've been accepted into a program, you can say, again, hi, great, I've been accepted. I have a disability, what do I do? And we have a process for that. And like just mentioned, again, accommodations may be different abroad. So we do have to work with a couple of different people to make sure we can get all the crucial stuff that you need. And then thinking about other things that you might have to go without in your host country. So we will provide instructions about all of this after you've applied. Students get a big pre-departure checklist in the UCEAP portal that has a bunch of information, all of the stuff about abroad in your program, and it will include disability accommodations requests and stuff like that. So the first part is to meet with your disability service specialist on your campus. And so you're going to meet with them, talk through your accommodations, and then they can provide a letter outlining all of the accommodations that you get on your home UC campus. And so this letter will have your name, which program you're going on, which term, and then it'll just list out the accommodations that you are approved for on your campus. And each disability office on the UC campus are pretty familiar with this process. We get a lot of these letters all the time, and it's, for the most part, from what I've heard from students, pretty easy. They just meet with their specialist, they go over what accommodations you get at your UC campus, they create this letter, and they can send it to the study abroad advisor or someone at UCEAP. So once you've received this letter, you can take it to your study abroad office. Most likely, if you're going through a UCEAP program, this will be our system-wide office. And so usually you can send it to me, someone like me, like a study abroad advisor, a program specialist, an academic specialist will get it to the right person. And again, you don't have to memorize anything I'm saying here. All these instructions will be provided for you in the pre-departure checklist. Once you receive that letter from students, someone from UCEAP will then reach out to you and tell you your next steps. So for example, if you are approved for a reduced course load, someone like a UCEAP academic specialist might reach out to you to discuss any program restrictions. So some programs are really strict on how many units a student can take on the program. Some are pretty flexible, but having these conversations early is always way better than doing it too late and then running into some other issues. And so again, once we receive that letter and we've communicated with you, then we'll put you in contact with services abroad. So this might be a disability service office at the host institution, or it could be something like a wellness center or like a specific person at the host campus who's a disability specialist. And they will talk you through what kind of accommodations are possible at the host institution. So some of these people, when you meet with them abroad, they will say, great, like we have your letter. We'll talk to you when we get on site. And so you won't have any communication with them until you're on site at your program. Other programs, they'll talk to you way before you've even left the country to go to your abroad program. So it really depends on the program, and this depends on your comfort level. If you really want to know what kind of accommodations you can get before you leave the US, you can always reach out to someone at UCEAP, and we have records of what past students have done and can probably guide you to a program that will meet all of your accommodations and needs that you want. So yeah, that's kind of the process. And again, communication is key. Please, please, please tell us and disclose anything you would like about your disability. It's always way better to have this information earlier on in the process than it is to try to scramble and find accommodations for you later on down the line, like when you're on site in your program. So right after this slide, I'll be talking about flights as well. And so usually the logistics of flying is that all airlines have accommodations policies. So you can always just look up like United accommodations policy and their website will pop up and you can see all the info about accommodations on their website. And that's the best place to start when you're looking for picking your flights, finding your flights to go to your host institution and stuff like that. Usually you have to contact the airline a couple of days in advance to request certain accommodations to make sure that you can get through security, say if you have a wheelchair or something like that. And doing all that kind of stuff if you have other medical supplies that you'll be bringing with you like through security. speaking of medical supplies and medications, you should take these supplies with you, all your medications that you need, but do not take them in your checked bag, put them in your carry-on. So your medications can be in a carry-on bag, so they don't have to count against a airline's carry-on limit. And so your medical supplies should be in one bag, so it's not mixed with your personal items and can be clearly identified as medical supplies or medications. Then it'll be way easier to pass through security when security can clearly see all of your medications and supplies in one area. For prescription medications, you should pack those in the original labeled containers. And for flights where the Air Carrier Access Act applies, they do have assisted devices do not count against any limit on the number of pieces on a carry-on baggage. So you can put all the stuff in your carry-on and don't check it. That way you can get through security with all the supplies that you need. You can also check one wheelchair for free, and everyone has the option to do that. And so usually checking it at the gate can also be an option if you have a long layover somewhere and you want to use your wheelchair during that layover. Checking it at the gate versus checking it before security can be a better option. So you can have it with you on the flight and then use it during your layover. And speaking of using equipment like that, to avoid broken equipment on either a flight or any time while you're abroad is something that you really should think about in your pre-departure planning and planning all this other stuff that you're doing. So larger chairs, so bigger, maybe electronic wheelchairs, may need to be partially disassembled during the flight so they can fit on the plane. And so you can always carry instructions with you about how to either disassemble any chairs that you have or any other any other equipment that you're bringing with you on your flight. You can also we highly recommend consider bringing voltage converters for adaptive equipment. So if, in the US, I can't remember the watt standardization we have, but in Europe, it can be different. And so usually when you use a computer or something, the plug automatically adapts the voltage. But for other equipment, such as maybe like powered wheelchairs, you might need to bring a voltage converter to make sure that you can power everything correctly. And the best place to do that is you can talk with your manufacturer of the wheelchair. Usually they can have a lot of information about what types of voltage converters can be brought and stuff like that. And then on top of that, you can research places in the host country that you're going to where a wheelchair can be repaired. And so you can understand the cost of that. So if you're taking a manual wheelchair, those might be easier to get repaired because maybe something as simple as a bike shop can do it. Other places, if you have a power chair, you can also talk to the manufacturer and ask if they have any recommended places to get your wheelchair fixed if anything were to happen. So thinking about that and thinking about how you're navigating your new country, it's best to have a large front caster. So you can consider freewheel to raise your front caster off the ground. So if you're in a country that has maybe a lot of cobblestones or a lot of sidewalks that are maybe misaligned, and to make everything easier and make sure you don't have broken equipment and you don't get hurt, and so for your own safety, it's better to have a large front caster like that can attach to your chair and give you extra support. And other students can also, if you have a manual chair, you can have like a power drive or something, and it's a motorized device that can attach to your chair to give you some more support as well. And I'll pass it back to Erin.
Thank you. Some students might require a personal care attendant. Some students might find one from home, or in the local host, or a personal care attendant in the host country that they'll be attending. I don't think it's very important that you check with the vocational rehabilitation or Medicaid about personal care attendants. This is important because students who do utilize this need to disclose that they need a dependent in their study abroad program early, because because students who have personal care attendants will have to have housing for the person, and there might be different immigration requirements depending on who is coming with the student on their program. Excuse me for sputtering. I'm going to pass it back to myself. So now let's talk about sign language interpreters. You can find interpreters locally or in your host community. Like Samantha mentioned early, it's really important that you disclose these things early. You can check with the disability services about funding in order to receive a sign language interpreter. It's not always included in your program. Sometimes you do have to pay an extra additional fee for this. However, like we said, you can check early about funding in order to get this taken care of. Know that ASL interpreters may be harder to find in countries where ASL is not commonly used. And you might want to keep in mind that ASL is different in each country. There are different dialects. And you can also clarify expectations on when the interpreter will be expected to provide services. Do you need these services in class? Do you need them every day, on a day-to-day basis when you travel? And that's something you'll talk to your specialist on ground and UCEAP advisor about. And now we'll pass back to Justin for service animals.
Okay, so I guess we're going to talk about service animals, and there's really three aspects to really mostly service dogs for this slide, which is going to be importation, flights, and daily life. So those are the three things that we talk about here on these bullets. So starting with importation, pretty much most countries are going to want to have information verifying that the dog is in good health, that it's not carrying diseases like ringworm, and that it doesn't have rabies, and it's also vaccinated against rabies. And there's no such thing as an importation process for service dogs. Your service dog will travel into the country as if it was a pet. Island countries can be particularly anxious about this, especially with diseases like ringworm, and also, might I add, island states. If any of you have ever traveled to Hawaii, you'll notice that you had to go through some extra requirements. Countries like New Zealand or Australia, for example, will require that all pet dogs have a process of about 9 days, I think, of quarantine. I don't know how it is with Australia at the moment, but I do believe that New Zealand offers you an option to vouch that it's a service dog, and that doesn't allow you to get away from the quarantine requirement, but it does allow you to quarantine with your dog at home as opposed to putting it up in a facility. So that's one thing that you'll want to think about when traveling to an island. We recommend checking with the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. They have a great tool online that gives you information on traveling with a dog from the United States to any other country. And it's a selector, so you can choose what country you're going to, and also traveling back to the United States. Because sometimes when you're traveling back to the US, the animal may also have to go through an examination. So going on to flights, most airlines, just as you can check an airline's page for its accommodation rules, you can also check there to get a sense of their policy around service dogs. An emotional support dog is not the same as a service dog, and the regulatory process for emotional support animals has been evolving, and I don't go into that here. But when you travel with flights, there are three types of flights. There are flights between non-US and non-US countries, flights between US and non-US countries. Actually, that's two types. A flight where the United States is the destination or departure is covered by the FAA, and therefore a service dog is a service dog if you can answer the two questions. This is a service dog because I have a disability, and the dog is trained to do X, Y, Z. You can have a self-trained dog on a flight like that, because you can have a self-trained dog. Sorry, I was interrupted. And that in itself, if you can answer those two questions, is a service dog. Now, on non-US to non-US flights, they're not covered by the FAA. or US disability law, and therefore you have to actually have a letter from a school certifying the dog is trained. The school has to be connected with an entity like Assistance Dogs International, or I believe there's another one, I forgot the name. ADI has a search tool on its website, so you can figure out if the school where your dog has been trained is in fact an ADDI certified dog. But the main catch here is that self-trained dogs are not going to be recognized, unfortunately, when you're traveling between non-US and non-US countries on flights. Within countries, so basically this just means that if you, for example, you might be planning to fly to Germany, you might have a self-trained dog. That flight with a transfer in Lisbon may look cheap and affordable, but you better think more about going directly from New York to Frankfurt rather than transferring in another European country or it being in a situation where you're going to be on a non-US to non-US flight because you're going to encounter issues there. So in most countries, dogs probably are going to be treated mostly like pets in community life. It's going to be a little bit more informal, and it's just going to be about the relationships you build with members of the community, checking with the store clerk, checking with the restaurant owner if it's going to be okay to take your dog in with you or not. You may be able to bring your dog into the school environment. That's going to be something that you arrange with the school. In certain parts of the world, though, like in the Middle East, dogs are considered inherently dirty, and there can be a little bit more aversion to traveling with dogs. In that situation, you may consider an alternative accommodation, or you may find that taking your dog is feasible. But this is an area that I'd say that we at the Clearinghouse have a little bit less insight. So going on to the next slide, we get to talk about medications that are legal and that you have prescriptions for. So for shorter programs, you may just get a 90-day supply that you travel with. In that situation, you want to, I think it was mentioned earlier, travel with the meds in the original containers, travel with them in a carry-on. You can take an extra carry-on if you need to, if you're traveling, for example, with diabetes supplies, and that should be at no extra cost, though you may need to let the airline know. But you do need to check the policy of the country where you're going to be traveling with the medications, because in certain countries, medications are illegal for importation, such as, for example, Japan. This is a little bit less common though, but it is something that you want to make sure. And there may be some documentation proving that the medication has been legally obtained elsewhere. So in some cases though, you may have to obtain the medication in the host country. And at that point, you'll want to check that it's legal to purchase it. And this also is going to vary from country to country. And if you find that you're not able to purchase your medication, then you may need to work out an alternative treatment plan with your care provider. And generally, we don't recommend mailing medications. So if there's a way that you can avoid that, we recommend doing that. But each country will have information on its page, on its government resources, explaining what the rules are. And there may be some different things you have to consider with documentation and duties and so forth. So that's going to be something that you'll have to figure out with the country if you do get in a situation where you're mailing medication. But again, we strongly recommend avoiding that. So I'm going to pass it on to Samantha to talk about travel insurance.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. So a quick thing about travel insurance, if you're going on the UCEAP program, UCEAP has provides travel insurance for all students on all UCEAP programs, and all students are automatically enrolled in our travel insurance, and you cannot waive out of it. So everyone's going to be getting travel insurance for the time that you're abroad. The UCEAP travel insurance starts 14 days before your program starts, the official date of your program, and goes all the way until 14 days after the official end date of your program. It's important to point out that this travel insurance does not replace health insurance, so all UCEAP students still need to maintain health insurance in the US for the time they're abroad, whether this is through UCShip or a private health insurance company. Either one is fine. So the UC and the UCEAP travel insurance plans do not exclude care for medically necessary treatment or pre-existing conditions, and preventative care is not included in the UC travel insurance policy. The good news is that you can check if you could be covered by a national healthcare service in the host country that you're going to. A lot of countries around the world have a national healthcare system that can cover you, even if you're a visitor, so you don't have to be a national of that country to get those services. And so accommodation costs are not covered by the UCEAP travel insurance. So just make sure to check with either UCShip or your private healthcare in the US to see if you need any other insurance to cover any other accommodations that you might have. And additionally, some fellowship programs, like for example, the Fulbright program, might help cover elevated healthcare costs as a reasonable accommodation. And also one thing I'd like to mention is that UCEAP has a really great health and safety team that can answer a bunch of specific questions related to specific cases and scenarios as they come up. So if you have a really specific health and safety issue that you're dealing with, you can always reach out to the UCEAP team and we can put you into contact with our health and safety team that can help you resolve any issues that you might have either before you go abroad or while you're abroad in the host country. Yeah, going on, I think Noah's gonna do some stuff.
Well, quickly, I had a colleague he was a study abroad prodigy, what I called him. He did his first study abroad program at age 12, and to save money for his study abroad program, he went and mowed lawns and did as much chores as he could to save to go on his first study abroad program to Mexico at age 12. At age 12, I was saving up money to buy a Michael Jordan poster. So some people are just really, like I said, prodigies. And here's the story of one of those study abroad prodigies, Haben Girma. We're going to watch a quick video about Haben.
Haben Girma, U.S. lawyer who is deafblind.
I would not be the same person I am now if I didn't go to Mali when I was 15 and show myself and show my parents that I can succeed and reach dreams.
The National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange presents The Power of International Travel.
The very first time I asked my parents to go abroad, they said no. They were terrified. It took maybe 3 months for me to convince them that it would be okay. I explained that I would make it work. I would find ways to do it. But I was 15, and so hearing it just from me wasn't enough. So we sat down and had lunch with my mom and dad and the coordinator, and she assured them that I would be safe, that they would find ways to make sure that I would get to participate in building a school in this tiny village in Mali, and that I would have a host family there who would take care of me and make sure I was safe. I think everyone goes through different stages in the process of traveling. We have times when we're really, really scared and nervous and not sure how something is going to work. Then we have other times when we're really excited and optimistic. When I came back from Mali, my first trip abroad, my parents noticed a difference in me. They felt that I was more confident, and they felt more confident in me going and doing things on my own. When I asked to go to Oregon for college, they weren't so scared because I'd been to Mali. Oregon? Not so far away. They figured I could handle that. And later, when I wanted to go to law school, they were ready. And since Mali, I've traveled to China, to Spain, to Costa Rica, to Ethiopia, and each trip I've done a much better job of ensuring that I had access to information. Every trip was a time, an opportunity to test out accommodations. When I realize something doesn't work, I discard it and try new accommodations and build new strategies. So I strongly encourage parents to give their children the chance to experience going abroad. It will be a growing up experience for the parents just as much as it is for the children.
This slide ties in good to, I think, about some of the things Haben was talking about. and self-advocacy, because it takes a lot of self-advocacy to get to where she was able to get. And there's what does self-advocacy actually mean? It's understanding your own needs and effectively communicating them to others, taking a proactive approach to accessing resources, solving problems, and ensuring accommodations are in place. And it's about being your own best advocate while respecting cultural differences and institutional structures. So some of the steps we want to talk about in terms of self-advocating is to prepare and to research, learning about the local disability laws, cultural attitudes, and available resources. That's going to be foundational to taking first having the baseline of knowledge to properly strategize in advocacy. Communication, early and clear. This ties into some other aspects we talked about, informing advisors and institutions about your needs in advance. Staying connected with disability services, other support networks like study abroad advisors, your host institutions, and using institutions that leveraging the resources that can offer help, like the NCDE, the Diversity Abroad Network for Education Abroad, and Disability Services offices. Some other recommendations, such as bringing letters and recording, outlining your needs, are some strategies we want to make sure that are acknowledged. Be persistent yet respectful. Advocate assertively, but understand that cultural differences exist, and being respectful, I think, is one of the ways to show a cultural adaptivity. And I think Haben said, when something doesn't work, she discards it. So adapt to unexpected challenges or changes in the accommodation. And sometimes, I think in the bigger picture, advocacy means creating a better environment for everyone. It's not just you who would benefit from the advocacy. For example, say if you're recording a lecture or taking notes in a lecture, that can help all students. So there's some strategies that we recommend in terms of self-advocating. Just to follow up, I'm going to show a video about Haben and what she did after law school and some of the things she's achieved, which I think highlights a real pioneer in advocating for herself, but also for others, but also what are the benefits of traveling, living, and studying abroad, and what you can do in your future career, and the benefits it gets you, the confidence, and the next steps it allows you to pursue.
This video contains descriptions for the visually impaired. Haben looking off camera, lights in background.
So many people have low expectations for those of us with disabilities.
Haben reading Braille.
They see the disability and think that's the whole story.
Haben looking and smiling to camera.
But we're complex. My name is Haben Girma. I'm an advocate for people with disabilities.
Photo, Haben wearing a cap and gown receiving her diploma at graduation from Harvard Law.
I graduated from Harvard Law in 2013.
Haben at Riverside Country School with an audience of students behind her.
And I used my skills and talents to remove barriers.
Haben greeting audience at the podium.
Good morning!
Haben and her guide dog standing on steps.
I'm a woman. I'm a person of color. I'm the daughter of refugees. And I'm deafblind.
Text, Harvard Law's first deafblind graduate disrupting disability rights. Haben talking to camera.
As a deafblind person in a sighted-hearing world, I struggled to find a system that works well for me to communicate with people.
Text, Haben developed her own communication system. Haben reading Braille. Text, she uses a wireless keyboard and Braille note computer designed by Humanware.
I discovered that if I connect a Braille computer with a keyboard, I can easily connect with people.
Reporter laughs while talking to Haben.
Most people don't know sign language, but know how to type.
Haben reading Braille, person typing.
As people are speaking, I'm reading their words on Braille through my fingers.
Haben on keyboard reading Braille.
Over the years, I've heard of other deafblind people also using the system.
Text. Haben also travels with her guide dog. Milo sitting beside Haben.
With me is a small German Shepherd. His name is Milo. He was trained at the Seeing Eye in Morristown, New Jersey. It's like the Harvard of guide dog schools. And now he travels the world with me.
Milo and Haben walking in Paris, France with l'Arc de Triomphe in front of them.
Sometimes people wonder, why would a blind person travel?
Haben scaling a wall at the City Museum in St. Louis, Missouri.
There's so much to feel and experience and taste.
Haben eating onigiri. Haben partner dancing at a salsa club.
I love partner dancing. I can't hear the beat or see the other dancers, but I can feel the beat through the hands and shoulders of the people I'm dancing with. When I went to Hawaii, I went surfing in the wonderful warm water.
Haben riding a wave in Waikiki, Hawaii.
I reached out to several surf schools and they told me, we've never heard of a deaf-blind surfer. And then I found one surf school that said, let's find a way, let's figure it out. The instructor surfed side by side. Disability is rarely the problem. The problem is often society creating arbitrary barriers, and we all need to work together to remove those barriers.
Text. Haben is also an aspiring comedian. She attends classes at Face Off Unlimited in Astoria, Queens in New York City. Haben laughing with the improv group.
I've been thinking about taking improv workshops for a long time. Humor is a powerful tool to help people feel comfortable.
Text. The comedy company created a special class after reading that Haben was turned away in her search for inclusive improv.
Sucks!
Haben interacting with her improv group.
As a person with a disability, I can help a non-disabled person relax.
Haben rehearsing with her improv group.
We're more likely to connect and get past ableism and stereotypes.
Haben's Braille typist Hallie typing to Haben. Text. Haben also has assistance from her Braille typist so she knows what each person is saying. Arrow pointing to Hallie. Haben's improv partner speaks.
I know there's a very large contract you have to sign. I didn't read it.
Haben talking to her improv partner.
I'm still thinking about the fact that you didn't read the contract.
Crowd laughs. Text. Haben finished Harvard Law in 2013. She is the first and only deafblind graduate from Harvard Law. Photo of Haben with her parents on graduation day at Harvard.
My parents had high expectations for me, and that taught me to also have high expectations for myself. I decided to become an attorney when I was in college.
Haben walking with Hallie and Riverside Country School staff into auditorium.
I noticed that when I used the Americans with Disabilities Act to remove barriers, it changed the whole culture, and I wanted to continue doing that.
Auditorium filling with students in bleachers.
I can't let fear control my life. I'm going to instead focus on what I can do.
Haben talking to audience.
Sign language is a form of innovation. I was told that if I wanted to get a job as an attorney, I needed to go to the best school possible. So I applied to Harvard, even though I thought I probably wouldn't get in. It was worth a shot just to try.
Students in auditorium clapping.
I learned that I got in, and I was thrilled.
Haben showing her keyboard to the auditorium.
Now I travel around the world teaching organizations to invest in accessibility.
Haben shakes the student's hand. Text. Haben is an advocate for accessibility and technological advances.
The majority of apps are not accessible.
Haben typing on her keyboard.
We keep asking engineers, developers, design with access in mind.
Haben texting her friend Gordon.
Reply button.
Because it drives innovation, drives revenue, and benefits all of us in the long run.
Text. Quote, don't call me inspirational, end quote. Haben skiing with guide.
People with disabilities get called inspirational all the time.
President Obama giving Haben a hug in the White House.
My response is, what are you inspired to do? Allow that emotion to drive change. Disability is not the biggest barrier. The biggest barrier is people telling me you can't do something.
Haben speaking at the president's address.
Ask people and hold them accountable. Allow me to share a story.
Panoramic portrait shot of Haben.
All my success shows what is possible when we create inclusive communities and give kids with disabilities an opportunity from the start. Inclusion is a choice.
CNBC Make It end credits.
Well, I would like I said, a study abroad prodigy. And we know that study abroad leads to many outcomes. And I think that highlights just all of the things that we want to achieve when we go abroad and we learn to live and thrive in new cultures and new places, challenge ourselves. And so I think Haben is a great example of someone who's taken the experiences that she's had and continues to build on them every day. So I'm going to go over some key takeaways, and then we can answer some questions at the end. The key takeaways I think we have are that accommodations vary. They're possible, but not guaranteed. So planning for alternatives is essential. Early disclosure, that's key. Communicating needs with the disability service offices and the study abroad offices ensures a smoother preparation from all parts of the process. Accommodations and disability definitions differ globally. So understanding and researching what is necessary to know what to expect in your host country and understand the cultural and legal differences. Plan ahead. Travel considerations, plan ahead for medications, equipment, accessibility needs in flights and while you're abroad, and self-advocacy. And I think knowing how to request and advocate for accommodation enhances the ability to overcome challenges. So that concludes the content of our presentation today. We do have a question in the chat. I'm gonna throw it back to you, Justin. And the question is from Emmeline, asking, any advice if a service animal is not a dog? If a student who, she's had a student who's had an emotional support animal that was a bird. So this is the difference between service and emotional support animals.
Okay, I mean, I'm not quite sure if which part this is going to be about, but I think that the issue is well, I think first of all, I'd say we have less insight into this because we haven't encountered many situations where students have traveled successfully with emotional support animals. But I do know many countries do pretty much straight up bar the importation of avian species, and I have had to look into this for certain countries in the past. And again, it's going to be kind of each country is probably going to have its own rules, but generally it becomes more complicated with emotional support animals because they can be a different type of, like, they can be frogs, they can be birds, they can be whatever. And it does get more complicated. And I think there's kind of more preferential regulations when it comes to cats and dogs because people own those as pets, but it gets more complicated when you're talking about other types of species.
Okay, I don't see
But often I think too, it kind of like when traveling on flights, like since like most airlines don't really recognize emotional support animals in the way that they recognize service animals, that sometimes there can be a situation where the animal has to travel as cargo, and I think that could kind of add complications for some people too. So that's all.
I hope that would answer the question for Emmeline. I don't see any other questions. So I'll conclude this webinar series, and I just want to thank the panelists especially for joining us today and contributing to this presentation. And thank you for attending and joining us. And this will be recorded and available on YouTube and on our website. And we're very glad to have completed the final workshop and the Exploring Your Identity Abroad series for 2024. There'll be more coming in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you.